You're listening to KNX In Depth, along with Charles Feldman. I'm Chris Seatons.
Now, we've been talking about a proposed new law that's moving through the California state legislature, which would make it so that only people who actually killed somebody would be charged with murders. In other words, the person who pulls the trigger would be, perhaps the person driving the getaway car would not be.
Continue with our two guests, the bill's author, that's State Senator Nancy Skinner, Democrat from the East Bay, and Eric Siddell, Vice President of the Association of Deputy District Attorneys for Los Angeles County, who is opposed to the legislation. Ms. Skinner, back to you now. The other states in this country, this law does apply. It's already in effect in other states. How many?
Well, actually, states such as Arkansas, Michigan, Kentucky have all narrowed their murder statute once the courts brought to their attention that this broad application really doesn't hold people properly responsible who are actually who committed the murder.
But, you know, there are people, and that's why the law was the way it was, or is, who...
We're talking that this concept was like a century ago. So, for example, California's murder statute, as written, was on the books.
Okay, but I don't want to go through. I don't want to go through 100 years of history. But what I'm getting at is there are clearly people who think, because this law has been the case and on the books for quite some time, or as you just pointed out, a century or more, that would have the attitude that, you know what, if a group of people go out and they commit a crime and somebody is killed and they're all part of that heinous act, why shouldn't they all be punished the same way?
But guess what? It's not always applied. So I could be part of, sadly, a group of 4 people, and I could be standing outside as the lookout, and I may not get that felony murder charge. And yet a young person or a person of color, they may get it. So it's not uniformly applied. And I think that's another thing that the public doesn't really realize, that yes, while the law is on the books this way, it is not applied to everyone.
So let me ask you then, if it were uniformly applied, then would you be happy with the law the way it is?
If it were uniformly applied, it would have been eliminated years ago. And I'll give you a great example, and I would recommend that people look at 60 Minutes. They can watch it online. There is a great case of 4 teenagers in California. Brandon Hine is who they focus on. Brandon Hine his sentence has been commuted by the governor. And these 4 teenagers were all given a life without parole sentence. Only one was the murderer, and that person pled guilty. The other 3 were not the murderers. And once that case got on 60 Minutes and there was the type of public outcry, the governor commuted Brandon Hine's sentence.
Eric Siddell, your reaction to that, the point she brings up, uniformity of imposing a law like this, or murder rather like this.
Well, I mean, there always has to be discretion. So that's the role of the prosecutors, not to always apply the full force of the law in every single situation. There has to be discretion as to each individual. The case, that the senator is talking about is a burglary and an attempted robbery case that occurred in Malibu in 1995. And if the governor feels that there are certain cases that are in excess, he can always use his power as governor to commute the sentence. The rule applies to inherently dangerous felonies.
All right. Eric Siddell, Vice President of the Association of Deputy District Attorneys.